This is Diddy's first alleged underage victim. He's come forward, a male accuser who says he was at one of the white parties. He says he didn't want to be named. He said that he was sexually assaulted by the Bad Boy founder when he was 16 years old. Now, allegedly, the incident happened at one of the Hamptons parties, I believe, or one of the white parties, actually. And everybody in Mama was there, allegedly. And the young man thought that this would be an opportunity to network and to get an opportunity to get a record deal or to get into the business of music. And he said Diddy quickly took it, according to the lawsuit, which was filed by Tony Busby. He said that Diddy took a liking to him and took interest in him right away. And as he was trying to sell himself as a music star, it quickly turned into a molestation situation. He said Diddy took him to a private corner and instructed him to drop his pants, expose his penis so that he could inspect it. And the young man says that out of fear, anxiety, is a quote, out of fear, anxiety, and the imbalanced power dynamic between himself and Combs, John Doe, that's the young man, then dropped his pants and exposed his penis as Combs previously instructed. I won't get into all the details, but it seems like Diddy then just literally molested him, allegedly. In the filing, the accuser called Diddy a menace to society, women, and children. I'm always fascinated by those distinctions between like society, women, and children. That's another conversation. He also claimed that the white parties were covered for other illicit activities. According to the filing, quote, there existed something sinister, a dark underbelly of crime, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, bribery, and prostitution. And then there was one other interesting accusation there, which is that the baby oil may have been laced with GBH. That it wasn't just the baby oil wasn't just there as baby oil or even as a lubricant, that he was dousing victims in lotions or similar body oils to make them easier to assault. As of now, John Doe was one of 120 plus victims to have accused the rapper of several sex crimes. And it is believed that 25 of those 120 plus victims are minors, or at least at the time of the allegation. Now, to his credit, I have to say this, although I think it's bullshit and don't care, Diddy's attorneys claim that the accusations were, quote, all outrageous and deeply prejudicial and could prevent him from getting a fair trial on his federal sex crime charges. It raises an interesting question, but I guess for me, are we at a point now, Dr. Lindsey, where when we hear these kinds of allegations, it's like there's so many of them, it's almost like it's hard to be outraged by each one. It's like back in the day when Donald Trump would say something racist or ridiculous. It's like at some point, like by day 30, you couldn't even keep track of all of it. How are you making sense of this moment where we're getting a Diddy allegation every day?
To be perfectly honest, for various reasons, it's not even that I've tuned out. I think I am very clear that what is being mapped here is a trajectory that surrounds kind of a culture of predation and violence and harm, and that each new allegation, each new person coming forward absolutely deserves, if that's what they're seeking, to have their story heard, to have that adjudicated, if that's the path that they're choosing. And not all survivors or victims choose the criminal legal system or the civil legal system for redress. Some people literally just want to be heard in these instances, and most never say anything. And so in this instance, when we're having kind of each day or every few days new allegations, and it usually is like a few at a time or 100 or 20 or something new that's coming out, I think what's important in this moment, and we touched on this when we first discussed this case, is for us not to be desensitized to the gravity of what is being alleged, while also being very careful with how we imbibe all of these different stories, because they're so harmful, because it reflects on us as a culture, what we've allowed, what we have prohibited, what is seen as normalized, what is seen as acceptable, what we have to do to actually reckon with this and to disrupt this culture of predation, which is not singularly just Diddy. Because what this moment has also meant is that people are responding in all kinds of ways that let you know, whoa, I would not be safe around you, nor would other people. right? People are telling on themselves in this moment. And so there's a personal level to this, there's a micro level to this, there's an intimate level to these revelations, and there's also this broader level of this singular individual and the network around him that have allegedly created this culture of predation and violence. And so I think there are a few different levels that we all have to process this on. And I know for myself, it is the intimate level that's been most pertinent for me, watching people in my sphere respond to this and seeing the variance among the responses to this.
I think I'm experiencing a very similar thing. I'm stunned by the sheer number. There's nothing that I've heard in the last month that has shocked me based on what I'd heard the previous 9 months. But the volume of it is overwhelming, and my fear, honestly, is that people will cease to be shocked, as you just talked about, right? That there's a way that you become, as you, to use your word, desensitized to it. Jameer, do you think this culture, this society, I'm talking about the United States in particular, has the capacity to kind of keep track of this? Like, do you think when Diddy's case comes up, I think it's in May now, May 5th or something like that, you know, if all the stuff comes out now, will it be passe by then? I mean, this is a country that couldn't even hold R. Kelly accountable for decades. Right. I mean, do you think we're gonna be able to hold on to this?
You know, I can't really speak for the country as a whole, but I think society and just like the culture of this. I mean, we spoke about it last time, but like, you know, people really getting their moments to get these jokes off. And even like I've seen the volume of jokes slow down as like things have continued to move. I think people hopped on the Diddy allegations, the Cassie video, you know, just those moments early, and just started to get everything, all the baby oil videos, or the, you know, don't go to, you going to Diddy party, like every other question.
Even calling him the diddler, right?
I mean, the diddler, yeah, all these things, you know, people just asking, yo, you ever been to a Diddy party? Yo, what was that Diddy party like? If you've been to and so I think it just became like a microcosm of actually what's going on, and kind of just ballooned into something different. I think the short answer is like, I think we don't take shit seriously enough as a society, and so people get these jokes off and then don't realize the true gravity of like what's going on. So I think things will kind of be, not to say stale, but like a lot slower until the trial comes back up, and then it intensifies again because now it's being brought into the cycle, and people want to know who was at the white party, who's in the files, who, and we kind of just like, you know, I think it's a great point. You get exhausted. I know I personally have. And I remember our last conversation of just like trying to just keep a open and conscious mind and not be desensitized. But I think it is shocking for me just to know the sheer volume of like what's going on, and then what that means for my childhood as somebody who saw him as a creative hero and was like, damn, I want to be like him when I grow up. But now knowing like even he wasn't who I thought he was or presented himself to be. So it's tiring. It's exhausting. It's shameful a little bit. It's like, damn, like you really don't know who people, I mean, and not say I idolize them, but people, you know, looking up to people like heroes as creative inspiration for myself, and realizing that, you know, this dude is human. He's not, you know, this pedestal, a statue or a figure that I put him on. He's a human being.
Let's look at the other side of that though, Treva. He's human, but there's a way that now he's been looked at as subhuman, right? There's a way that he's going to be framed as a monster and a predator and evil, which is how we tend to frame people right before we incarcerate them. How is there room in this narrative to see Diddy as someone who was harmed, or see Diddy as someone who deserves mercy, or Diddy was someone who can be atoned. Again, I think, and this is my opinion, I think Diddy's guilty. I think he's guilty of, I don't know if he did everything he's accused of, but I know he's done enough of it to need some serious accountability. I know that I believe these children, these young people, I believe these women, I believe these stories on the whole, and I believe what he's done is indefensible. So in light of that, I have to ask myself, then what do we do with a person? What do we do with the Diddy? And then at the legal level, Diddy's point is, as his lawyer said, is if all these civil cases keep coming out, and every day the news is filled with Diddy molests this person, Diddy touches this person, Diddy diddles this person, right? Then what do you do in May when he's going up for a criminal case if the world already presumes, can he actually get a fair trial? I mean, it's a reasonable question. And also, it's hard for me to care that whether this trial is fair because I think he did it, but I have to look beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really tough questions, Mark. I think it is. My short answer is I don't think he gets a fair trial based on the standards of our criminal legal system, that he'll have presumptive innocence going into this. I don't think that is what is going to happen. I think there's a number of things that have prevented that, including video footage of one of the many vicious assaults that Cassie Ventura brought to the fore and puts into a context. You have folks who have, even prior to these specific allegations, who have talked about Diddy in very negative ways. Many of his artists who worked closely with him in doing this. I think what's going to be important to hold in this moment, in the ease with which we can singularize what he's done and talk about him as a monster, as the predator, as the diddler, right? Like all of these names that we like to think about, because that's a mistake. That is actually the wrong thing to take away from this as the lesson, the singularizing of it. Okay. One, there is a culture around him. There is folks around him who were able to, a lot of people turned away from what we saw, from what we heard, from what was being experienced by a bunch of people, right? There's not just, and even in the civil lawsuits that we're talking about, it's not just Diddy being implicated, right? And there's something about the ways that we normalize predation in culture, people with power, people who have access to unlimited money, people who have access to saying you get this job and you don't get this job, people who have that. We saw this in the R. Kelly case. We saw this in Epstein. We see it in Harvey Weinstein. We see it again and again and again. And if we keep going back just to the individual, we never actually address the culture of predation that allows for us to have a more robust system of accountability. Because if our accountability is just get this singular predator out of our community and suddenly predation is gone, well, we know no numbers have changed in terms of women, children, men, gender expansive folks being harmed through sexual violence since Diddy's been locked up, right? Like that number, that rate continues. And so I think we have to be very careful about the kind of monstrosity of an individual argument being the predominant thing. Not saying that that can't be in the conversation, but being the predominant thing, because it lets us off the hook. And I want us to be on the hook. I want to be on the hook. And I want us to deeply care about who was harmed. And that is something that banning about who might have been at the parties, what really happened, how much baby oil, that shit ain't never going to get us to actually caring for victims and actually rooting out sexual predation. It doesn't.
That's real. Go ahead, Jimmy. I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, no, I was going to say to Dr. Lindsey, to your point, I think that's where we are in society. And I think where we always have been, I don't think at the root of it, people want to get rid of predatory behavior because it'll make so many people look at themselves, go, "Hey, well, I'm not a monster." So I think what we do is we go after the celebrity. It's the triumphant story of somebody rising to the top from obscurity, from the making it out the mud, and then you get to a certain point, and now like another generation don't fuck with you like that, and so they'll tear them down. And not to say, rightfully so, but we've seen this continuum throughout history, throughout celebrity, throughout political figures, throughout everybody who stays at the top of the mountain too long, and then people start peeling the layers of who they are down. So I don't think we get to a point where we actually address the root of the issue. I think it's just fun as a society when people rise to the top and then we do our damnedest to tear them down fiber by fiber until they don't exist anymore. But then somebody else does the same thing. But we never get to the root of the issue, which is like all this behavior that is ingrained in American culture. We don't want to do that, but we want to, build you up to take. It's fun. Like that is society's, like we just can, it's a continuum.
Mhm.
As a society, we love doing that.
I agree.